there, it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Today's video is going to be a little bit longer, I apologize, because I'm going to show you 3 different finished cards and the ways that we can use stencils in a slightly different way than maybe what we're kind of used to using them. Often I just pick up a stencil and I just use it really quickly to get the pattern through onto my page, and today I just wanted to show you a couple of different ways that we can use them. So I have this stencil here. It's kind of almost like a mandala almost. I'm going to use some Wilted Violet, Salty Ocean, Mowed Lawn, Spiced Marmalade, Candied Apple and Mustard Seed, and this pretty much makes a rainbow for me. Now you could use any inks at all, but as you guys know, the Distress Oxides are definitely one of my go-to and I use them often. I have a white sheet of Nina Solar White cardstock here, and I am going to do this card in kind of a rainbow fashion, but again, you could use any shades and any colors that you wanted to. I just want to put down a really light layer of ink first, and then I'm going to go back over top with my stencil and get a really dark layer. Now, all I really want for this one is the middle piece, so it just needs to be really small. Then the next colors in the rainbow are going to be the orange, yellows and greens, and I'm kind of going to all blend that into one part here, kind of the next part of our stencil. So I've got my light layer underneath, and then I'm going to pop my stencil on over top and go over with a little bit heavier hand in the ink. Now you could do this, I mean I'm doing it in kind of a circular fashion, but you guys could use anything with squares or even just strips and lines in a stencil. So it's kind of just about looking at the stencils that you have in your stash and then seeing how you could divide them up. So for the last couple of layers here, I've got my blue and my purple. So I'm just going to do that really light first layer and then come back to the dark one again so that I have my whole kind of stencil complete. And I know it looks like a little bit of a hot mess at the moment, but it will come together, I promise. I will do my best to link all of the supplies in the description box below. I'm not sure if I still have all of the links to the stencils. Some of these are really old, but I will definitely do my best for you. I also have a link down in the description box to our Facebook group, and our Facebook group is a really cool place where you guys can share all of your creations with me that you get inspired to create from these videos. So I really love seeing what you guys create. And then once I'm finished all the inking of the stencil, I'm going to bring in my Hero Arts Infinity Circles set. And this is one of the main reasons why I love this set so much, is that there is a circle size for everything, because the circle sizes are so close together. I think there's maybe 18 dies in that set. So far I have invested in the rectangles and the circles, and I'm hoping to pick up the squares soon as well. So I'm using one of the smaller circles to cut out that middle part here. Now we do not want the middle part, but I do want the middle part of the red one. So this is cutting out the center of the orange so that you can see it through there, because I am going to eventually layer these up. Now I want to do the same thing here. I'm going to use another circle because I don't want that inside blue part there that you can see that is partially stenciled. I just want the outside part, and then I've got the bigger circle on there, and that will cut out the entire design. So this one will layer on top of the green one. Then I have this We Are Memory Keepers very basic embossing folder. It's just some nice lines, and I'm going to do that in a light grey cardstock. I think this is the Lawn Fawn cardstock. And this just gives it a little bit of a texture in the background of the card and not quite so plain. And this just creates a little bit more interest in the background, so you can see the nice texture that it leaves there. And then it's kind of time to start putting the card together. So again, these pieces all look like a little bit of a hot mess right now because of the way they are cut out, but nobody will see it. And when I put foam tape on here, you could definitely use some fun foam or some wider foam tape. I was just sort of figuring this out as I was going, how I wanted it to go, so I wasn't sure how much foam tape I would need. So I'm going to pop that one up on top of the red one so that it's a nice clear step up and it's popped up. Again, you can see the back looks terrible, but that doesn't really matter for now. It'll all go away in a minute. Then I'm going to use some foam tape here and pop it around the last circle that will go on top of everything. and that one will pop up on top of there. So all of those harsh edges kind of disappear and nobody will end up seeing them. I add a little bit of liquid glue to the center there, and then I'm just going to off-center the circle a little bit so that some is hanging off the edge, and I will cut that off nice and neat with a pair of long scissors. Then all I have to do is add a little sentiment. I did decide that I wanted to trim off just a tiny little bit of that grey so that you can see some of the card base behind it. The card base for all of these cards is a 110 pound Nina Solar white card base, and they are all 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So you can get that nice wee glimpse of clean white behind our front panel. So that's what it ends up looking like, and it kind of takes a relatively plain stencil into something a little bit more. Then I'm going to use my current favourite sentiment set called It's the Little Things from Letter It, and I'm going to stamp out 3 sentiments here, 3 different ones, but stamp them out quite a few times, and I just have these sitting on my desk to use for different cards that I'm creating. So I'm going to do all of the heat embossing. I'm just going to white heat emboss it on some black cardstock, and this will be my sentiments for all 3 of the cards today. So I've just got a With Sympathy, and then You're Awesome, and Cheers to You sentiments today. But you could obviously have anything at all. I did use my anti-static powder pouch on this paper before I heat embossed, and that means that I didn't have too many little stray bits and pieces of white embossing powder, because that is one of those things when you are embossing on black cardstock, all of those little white specks are going to show up. I'm just using my trimmer, as I said, to trim all of these out so that they are ready to go, and that kind of feels like a really efficient way of card making to me, so that I don't have to stop each time and make a different sentiment. I'm just going to pick the Cheers to You one to go on here, and I kind of see that this could be a birthday card or lots of different occasions that would fit this really well. So I'm just going to quickly snip off the ends with my scissors, and then because that center circle is already popped up, all I need is a tiny little bit of foam tape to the very right hand side of this and liquid glue on the rest, and that will finish off the sentiment for this one. Now you could definitely add more gems and things to this if you wanted to add a bit of bling, but I like it just the way it is, and I kind of like the focal point being on all those layers of that coloured stencil. So that is card number 1 complete, and we're going to move on to the second one. Now again, you could use lots of different stencils for this one. This is just what I happen to have. Because for this card, all I'm going to do is create a background at the beginning, and then I'm also going to create my focal point using stencils as well. So I have the Nuvo Glimmer paste, and then I also have, this is the Cosmic Shimmer. This is a texture paste. Now whatever you have in your stash, there will be lots of things that will work here. You don't necessarily have to use sparkle paste or texture paste or embossing pastes. There are lots of amazing products out there, so again, just use what you have. I'm going to line up my stencil so that it covers my card front, but the stencils that I have don't always completely cover my card front, and it's easy to be able to shift them up and down. I've done that in plenty of videos before, and it's definitely not a problem for me. I'm going to add a nice even thin layer here of the Cosmic Shimmer texture paste, and then take it off and put this aside to dry. As I said, this is just going to be my background piece, and that's why I made it a nice white colour. I'm going to use some cracked pistachio, peacock feathers, and twisted citron for my focal point here. Now this is kind of just the background part. Again, you could also use some patterned paper or some ink pads that you have. I have some of the Distress Oxide re-inkers, so I find those really helpful for making some of my watercolour panels. I have a watercolour piece of cardstock here. I added a little bit of water to my re-inkers once I had put them down, and then I'm just going to kind of smush the paper down into the ink. I ended up doing 2 because there was so much ink there left on my non-stick sheet. This is just the little non-stick replacement mat for the Tim Holtz glass media mat. I don't own the glass media mat, but I do find it really, really helpful and a really good size for my little crafting space. So I ended up making 3 panels here, and I often end up making a couple because I prefer to kind of have a little bit of choice when it comes to which one I want to use in the end. And that is just one of the little things that I do as a crafter that kind of helps me make decisions without getting stressed about it. So you do you and do whatever works for you. All of these panels don't get put to waste. I have a gorgeous little crafter who often crafts right beside me who wants to do the same thing as me, so she often uses up any spare panels that are going. I am going to heat set these, but of course you could definitely let these air dry and go away and do some jobs and come back. And this is the stencil that I am going to use. Now, obviously the one on the right here is probably meant for just inking some colour through, and the middle and left leaves are meant for adding the finer details. However, I am going to use just the ones in the middle and the left, and for that I'm going to use some BoBunny paste here. This is stencil paste. As I said, they are called all different types of things, and this one is the gold colour. Now I've just blocked off that other leaf so I don't get any of that one, but I ended up stenciling 2 of the ones on the left here, and then I also did one of the dotted ones, which is the one in the middle. So that I could fit 2 of these on and that I could just kind of get on with things, I did use a heat gun to dry this, not all the way, but just lightly, so that I wouldn't mush it when I put my stencil back on top to do the second leaf. Now, as I said, I actually ended up using only 2 leaves on the final project, but it is always good to create extras and have leftovers for other cards later on. So I've got all of my leaves stenciled on there, and I don't think I showed you doing the dotted one. I am going to dry these a little bit, and then I did end up going away for a minute and coming back, but it's definitely best to let these dry thoroughly, whether you do it by a heat gun or just air drying, before you move on to the next steps. So I'm going to cut these out now. I'm going to fussy cut them out, which I don't mind doing at all. I don't mind a little bit of fussy cutting if it's not too tricky. And these leaves have pretty smooth edges that I'm going to follow, so it was no problem at all. Now this is just one way that I'm going to use my stencils to kind of create a focal point. I've created the background using stencils, and now I want to stretch my stencils a little bit and make these a little more 3D-ish then, rather than just popping them down flat onto my background. So you can see there the gold is sparkling really nice, and I have most of my elements all put together ready for the card. I am going to add a little bit of peacock feathers around the outside of my card here. Now this is one of the colours that I used in the background. It's just the ink pad form instead of the re-inker. Then I'm going to use some liquid glue. That is the Ranger Multi-Medium in the matte finish, and it's just in a little glue bottle from AliExpress, and I'm going to pop that down onto my little peacock feathers matted layer. And then this is all going to go down onto my card base, my Nina Solar White card base. So there's kind of the background done, and you can see that those little dots with the stencil paste was nice enough to create a background, but hopefully not too distracting. I've got a nice big piece of hand-cut circle foam here. It's just fun foam to pop this up a little bit more. And then I've popped a nice large vellum circle right there in the middle. I have my 2 fussy cut leaves, and I'm going to put this right hand one down nice and flat, and then for the left hand one I'm going to add a little bit of foam tape just to pop it up off the other leaf. Then I have those sentiments that we heat embossed earlier on, so this is going to be my sympathy card. I'm using a tiny little bit of white satin ribbon here just to create a nice little bow to go down the bottom. And it is a really kind of delicate little bow. I'm cutting off the edges, and then I do actually seal these with a little lighter just so that they won't unravel on me or the recipient when they receive the card. I'm using a little glue dot to keep this in place. You could definitely use the matte medium. It would just take a little bit longer to dry. Then I'll pop that down there, and I've got the sentiment, which I'm going to just use some liquid glue and pop that kind of to the right hand side there. I just need to cut a little bit off so it will tuck under nicely. I am also going to use some little tiny scissors to create a little banner there. You could definitely use some dies to die cut out all of these sentiments. However, sometimes I find it just as quick to pull out some little scissors. I'm using some liquid glue to pop the sentiment down the side, and that is card number 2 complete. So we used 2 different stencils here, one to create the background and one to create the focal point. And it is a little bit hard to capture here, but this card has lots of great textures which you can kind of see in these up close shots here as well. Next on, we are going to move on to card number 3, which is the final one for today, and this one is so simple. We are literally just going to layer up stencils, one on top of the other. So my first stencil I'm going to start off with, and this is going to be some cracked pistachio. I do want this to be a kind of light layer, so I'm not going to go in really heavy. I do find finger daubers really good for this. They easily enable me to either have a heavy or a light application of ink, and that's one thing that I really like about them. Don't worry about getting this layer too smooth because we will be adding things on top of it, of course. And I did shift my stencil a little bit, but it's easy enough to line up again. So this is going to be a kind of 3-layer card, but really a 1-layer card. As I said, we're going to layer up 3 stencils, and the second layer is going to be peacock feathers. Now I want this to be a slightly darker and bolder color, so I have this little words stencil here. And there's 2 reasons why I'm going to add a slightly darker layer of ink, a heavier layer. Number 1, I want this to kind of come through on top of the cracked pistachio, which is underneath. And the second reason is because this is quite a fine stencil. There's not a whole lot of stenciling that will come through on the other side, so I do want to make sure that it's definitely noticeable. And once I pull this off, you'll see that they layered up really nicely. This is another good thing about using the oxide inks, is that they do layer up. Now I have one more layer to go, and that is the stencil here. However, it is too big for what I need, so I have some scrap masking paper here. You can see it's very scrap. I am going to take some bits and pieces from this and just mask off all the pieces that I don't want. So I do want this to be a kind of another focal point of my stenciling. So I'm just going to rip off lots of little pieces, and I want to create a smaller circle in the middle, and that will be what I stencil on to my page. So using all of that masking tape, I was able to use up the scraps, which is also another good way to use up those bits that you're not sure what to do with. And I'm going to use some VersaFine Onyx Black ink here. Now I like this ink because it's a really nice dark ink. It is a pigment ink, so you have to give it a minute or 2 to dry, but the Oxides are a hybrid ink, so they also need a little bit longer to dry as well. So this is a really good card to heat set after you are done. Now you can see that that definitely stands out from the kind of busy background that we have created, and I'm just going to add a few of these all over the front, making sure that they come off the sides of the card as well. You can add as many or as few of these as you want to, and I'm just adding them all over the place. Again, there's no rhyme or reason as to where I'm adding them. And as I said, if you just have a look through your stash, see what you have that you think you can layer up, and have a play around. Some of them you will layer up and think that they actually take over each other and they don't layer up very nicely, but it's just a matter of finding a nice little balance. Now to finish off this card, as I said, we did create a really busy background, and I already have my sentiments heat embossed and pre-cut. So I've got this tiny little with sympathy sentiment here. I'm adding it onto a piece of vellum because I want to just calm down that background here and make sure that my sentiment is going to stand out. I'm adding a little bit of thin foam tape to the back of it there, and you can't see it because my nice little black sentiment covers it up, popping it straight through the middle, and then I will tack down those ends onto the back of the card. And then again, I'm going to pop this onto my 110 pound Nina Solar White card base, and that will finish off card number 3. I had so much fun creating all of these cards today, looking through my stash and using up stencils, and plenty of them. I hope that you guys do the same and that you found some inspiration. Let me know how you went on in the comment section down below, and as I said, please come and share some of your projects with me on our Facebook page. Take care, and I will see you next time. Thanks, bye!